as we're getting close to the end of the program, Rob, I've often been heard talking about the subject of CI/CD, which you just mentioned, which is actually CI/DC. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that acronym or aren't familiar with the idea, the notion that Rob and I talked about in the past and that Rob just mentioned relative to a continuously integrated data center, I do have a blog on my LinkedIn page. You can find it there if you'd like to get more thought on it. But I wrote that with a long history of perspective associated with it, right? And Rob, I know you and I have had this conversation before, but for the edification of anybody who thinks that this podcast is still interesting at this point, and I hope they do, because I love this.
More soapboxes to get on. They got to be
right.
Listening.
Yeah, this is a hugely important topic for so many reasons. But when I was running infrastructure, I never had enough people, right? Mm-hmm. We never had enough time. And even in organizations that had the money, we were second-class citizens most of the time. And to be able to get the people we needed, without the people, we became imaginative in how we deployed and how we created solutions. But the one area, and this area covers a number of potential issues, but this one area that kept me awake the most at night was going to bed knowing that there were things in our infrastructure that we should be doing, but that we weren't doing. Like, it's sort of like, I've got a lot of wheels on this vehicle. There's a heavy load on it. I know I should stop and check the bearings, but it's a real pain in the ass and I don't have the time because I really need to get there. And so you're riding on those bearings, hoping they don't seize up on you. And when you talk about infrastructure, those bearings are anything from, did you get the firmware update to a specific set of disk drives that you had, and did you deploy it? Did you put that patch on the BIOS to the specific number of Dell servers that you have running? Yeah. And can you do that in an appropriate period of time without affecting production? And those problems were a real problem with 3, 4, 5 data centers that I had to worry about around the world. Now, I want the people that are listening to think about that from a perspective of, what does that look like if you've got 100 locations? And whether you're solving a problem for a customer that's using your website, your edge infrastructure to supply somebody else with IT benefit, or you are direct to consumer, you cannot afford to tell your insurance agent or your buyer that, oh, that 0-day threat, it takes us a couple of days to update each site, and we have to bring it down for a few hours while we do that. So we'll probably have all 100 sites done in about 3 months on a 0-day threat. You can't do that. That's not an option.
You probably just named an ideal situation for most people, because in the case you're describing, most companies have not worked out the automation to do that work.
Exactly.
And so what they would be doing is they'd be scrambling, they'd be taking people off of critical, ROI projects to run around and patch and manage that stuff as fast as they possibly could. So it becomes this ongoing, juggling of day-to-day operational, the keeping the lights on stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. So here's the ideas that we start with from that perspective, right? And of course, RackN product, our whole infrastructure as code design is modular and designed to isolate those changes so that you can pick up our tested modules for that and put them into your own workflow chains and not have to worry about, that component as much. But the thing that we've really learned is that this idea of repeatability is a core value to us.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we look at people automating things and it works once and they don't test the reset. They don't test what the repaving. And what we have learned is that if you can't hit a button confidently and have the environment reset and rebuild and go back into a pristine or go back into the right state, then you have really missed your ability to be confident in that automation. So what you described, that scenario, if you're not confident that you can deploy a patch to all of your infrastructure consistently or rebuild it from, scratch to a known state, or more importantly, from a known state to a known state.
Yep.
If you haven't, right, this is where RackN is really different, because while we're a software company, right, we are really looking to be operational partners with our customers. And we hear this quite a bit, right? We work with them to help them improve their operations, because part of what we've done is we've built a operational philosophy that makes a difference in how people run. It's right, this next generation thinking. And so this idea of repeatable automation, version control automation, where everything we do is delivered right from a Git repo and not ad hoc onto a server and endpoint. That philosophy, the discipline behind that we help customers enforce, is essential to making this stuff work. And by no coincidence, this is the secret, I'm air quoting, secret sauce that the hyperscalers use in their own data centers.
Right.
Right. The thing that I love to say, there is nothing in the water in Seattle that makes Amazon a better deployer. They don't have a secret mineral. They don't have special food, right? They have better process and the investment in automation.
Right. They don't have a secret decoder ring.
They don't have a secret decoder ring. The aliens have not written the tablets of, maybe there is something in Jeff's home that I'm not aware of, but nothing they're doing is secret sauce. It's investment and it's knowledge, it's standard components, and it's accessible to everybody in the market. Right. And I think that's what's so easy to forget is, as they do a great job marketing, it's not your core to be, running infrastructure. It is your core to run. If you're a technology company, it is your, right, or using technology, that is your supply chain. Give up parts of it. I totally get it. We use cloud like crazy. But at some point, especially if you're running edge locations and you're running the store, you need to know that you can manage that infrastructure. And it is marketing that tells you that you can't, not practice.
Right. And I want to, before we bring this to a close, I want to highlight a point that Rob, that you mentioned without calling it out in too much detail. And that's that without saying it out loud, you basically said that if you're working like, crazed sailors at the bottom of a ship trying to empty water that's leaking in to keep your infrastructure running, then you're not doing the things to make your infrastructure better and more protected for future growth and future benefit. And so regardless of how you look at your own labor, regardless of whether you like being a hero and woken up at 2 a.m, regardless of whether you think it's important to your customers that you be able to apply a 0-day patch in all of your locations in a 24-hour period, or do it in 6 weeks, keep in mind that when you're out shoveling the snow off the sidewalk, you're not looking at ways to keep the house warmer. You're not looking at ways to keep your guests more comfortable. You're not looking at ways to prepare for dinner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how you need to think about, in my mind, without trying to preach to everyone, in my mind, that's how you need to think about your role all the time, as far as what you're providing to your business.
Yeah, SRE would call that toil.
That's right.
And if your job involves a lot of toil, then you are not adding the ROI into your infrastructure that you need to be doing. No, Mark, this is a critical thing. The irony here is that very often the toil gets in the way of people improving their infrastructure. And we do see customers who are stuck, like they'll do a trial, they verify our stuff works, but they never have a window. Their management doesn't create a window, or they don't put the money in to sort of jump into that next thing, because the toil is always keeping them at water level. Yep. And then when they're drowning, they're not ready to make a meaningful change. So you have to think about this before you're toiling. And if you are toiling all over and barely keeping your head above the water, find a way to get the life ring and raise the bar on where you're going. The tools. Right. A lot of our customers are using 20-year-old tools to solve these problems, and they're never gonna get above water from that perspective, because the threshold of the tool is actually already under their real success point.
Right.